Okay, my name's Chris. I work for World Animal Protection, which is a global NGO that's kind of focused on animal welfare, and I manage our campaign in the UK, which is called Sea Change, which is all about ghost fishing gear, which is basically this kind of thing. This was taken last spring on a beach in Cornwall, and it's unfortunately a really common sight on beaches, not just in the UK but all around the world, and it's a major threat to marine life and the environment. So just a kind of summary, because some people were asking before, what's the kind of global estimate on ghost gear? A kind of conservative best estimate that we have is 640,000 tonnes that gets dumped into the ocean annually. But that's kind of, it could be more, could be less. Evidence is quite patchy, but we do know that it has significant impact for animals. Types of fishing gear, like this type of, this is probably made of like polyethylene or polypropylene, and this could last in the marine environment for up to 600 years. So
not digestible.
Not digestible. Andy, you mentioned, oh god. Andy, you mentioned the sperm whales earlier in your talk that were found with plastics in their stomach. One of the things that was found in the whales was a 13-metre piece of fishing net. So, 13 metres of something like that inside a whale. It's not a great story to be telling our grandchildren. Also, the kind of impacts of ghost fishing gear, it's not just for animals and a kind of blight on our coastlines. It's also really expensive and can have other impacts like tangling propellers on vessels. Also, the kind of ghost fishing cycle, which is basically like when a net carries on fishing and then acts as bait for more fish, catches more fish, catches more fish. That cycle of ghost fishing has an impact on the sustainability of fish stocks. So there's a number of different concerns that we need to think about. So I'm coming at it from an animal welfare perspective, but fishermen are also really concerned about this because it's actually threatening their livelihoods as well. So just because I'm interested in animals, these are the kind of impacts that you can have. Like, for example, this is a turtle that's been entangled in this kind of monofilament line. I brought a real life case study from Cornwall, just in case you guys are interested. This was a seal, I don't know if you can see this, a seal called Beast that was rescued at Christmas last year, and this was the net that was entangled around Beast's net. So it's a really fine plastic, so once the seal gets it around its neck, it causes absolutely terrible injuries because it's struggling to get out, can't get out, and it just digs deeper and deeper. So seals are one of the main species that are affected around British coastlines, but you might have seen videos on the internet, for example, of turtles being entangled because it's quite common. For example, like in the Maldives, there's a project that's all based around disentangling turtles. Seabirds also really affected by ghost gear, and they tend to make their nests out of pieces of fishing line, so the smaller bits, but then they end up getting tangled up, hanging themselves, or constricting their wings so they can't fly, they can't feed. So yeah, overall, it's not a pretty picture. So the causes of ghost gear are kind of wide-ranging. I think there's a kind of common misconception that sort of spans back many years that fishermen would deliberately dump their gear, but I think in most cases that's actually just not true. One of the main causes of gear loss would be something like storms. I don't know if you were paying attention to the news a couple of years ago in Wales. There was terrible storms, like it was the winter of 2014, and thousands of pots were lost by fishermen, and there was absolutely nothing they could do about it. They'd set their gear out to fish, storms came in, just took all the pots away, and now those pots are still out there catching fish. One of the things that's kind of interest to this event is spatial pressures. So when you have types of fishing gear that interact with each other and there isn't effective spatial management in place. So for example, if people have set out static gear but then trawlers come across and tow that gear away, it could be mitigated by the use of GPS data and efficient data sharing, but in some poorly managed fisheries that's just not the case. And then a kind of really basic but unfortunately widespread problem is just lack of disposal facilities. So if a fisherman has a net that's kind of nearing its end of life, they're not going to be able to use it to fish anymore. What can they do with that net? In some ports there's just like nowhere to put it, or there's a big fine attached with disposing of a net. In the UK it's £80 a tonne to dispose of gear, so it's a huge disincentive if you have an old fishing net that weighs, could weigh a lot. I don't actually know how much it weighs in tons, but £80 a tonne is a lot. So these are the kind of examples of why fishing gear might get lost. and that means the solutions are quite varied. So the types of work that we're interested in, so looking at why gear ends up getting lost, and how we can reduce the amount of gear that's entering the seas. So we're doing a lot of work around advocating for effective portside reception facilities, so places where fishermen can bring ashore gear. It doesn't have to necessarily even be their gear, it could be gear that they find at sea. At the moment, there's no reason why a fisherman would see a net at sea and bring it ashore, because if they did that, they'd have to pay to dispose of it, if there's even anywhere for them to dispose of it. So we want to make sure that ports have places where fishermen can dispose of nets, and they can get incorporated into a kind of recycling scheme. The recycling of nets is quite widespread in some parts of the world, but in the UK at the moment it's just really in Cornwall that you can recycle some types of net, but we want to see this type of net, trawl nets, being widely recycled. Removing ghost gear is something that we're quite involved in, so supporting beach clean operations and dive cleanups, but that's really not a kind of long-term solution to the problem. It's just a kind of putting a plaster on the problem. The real focus has to be on looking at why gear ends up at sea, and then trying to develop solutions incorporating technology but also best practice in fishing. So we work really closely with fishing communities, and animal rescue, so training people how to safely rescue animals and disentangle them is something that we are really supportive of. So we founded a kind of cross-sectoral alliance to address this problem, recognising that although we're an animal welfare organisation, based on all the things I said before about all the different reasons why ghost gear is a problem, so economic, sustainability, human health, livelihoods, food security, there's a lot of people who are actually interested in addressing this problem, and everyone's coming from different perspectives, and we need to find a way to work together. So we founded the Global Ghost Gear Initiative. This is a photo from our launch meeting last year. And this is made up of all different kinds of people, so like these smiling guys at the front, they're crazy guys who do diving, technical diving, to cut free nets and bring them ashore. We've also got academics who do research and data collection, people who work with making carpet tiles out of fishing nets, that kind of thing. Was that a question, or are you just stretching?
No, I was just stretching. I do have questions, but I'm going to let you go. You got your swing on. So.
All right. Okay. So the kind of focus of the Triple GI is across a number of different areas. So as I mentioned before, that 640,000 tonnes figure is a best estimate, but actually it really needs to be refined. So one of the working groups within the Triple GI is looking at building evidence of the problem, so standardising data collection on ghost gear, so that we can identify where the problem fisheries are and therefore know where the solutions can be best directed, because it's all well and good having solution projects, but if they're not in the areas where ghost gear is at its most dangerous, I mean, it's not worthless, but it's not the most effective use of our resources. So that's a project where members around the world now are contributing to understanding the flow of ghost gear, where it's coming from, where it's going to. And a really good example of where the data collection has been really interesting is in Australia. They were finding in the Gulf of Carpentaria huge amounts of ghost gear washing up, and it was having a big impact on their marine wildlife, and also all these beautiful beaches covered in old nets. But a bit of research over a number of years identified that those nets weren't actually coming from Australian fisheries, so doing outreach with Australian fishing industry wasn't actually the most effective way of addressing the problem. Through their research, they realised that a lot of the nets that were coming to their beaches were actually coming from Indonesia. So then they developed a project advocating with fishermen in Indonesia, and then working in partnership with the Australian fisheries to clean up the problem as kind of like a corporate social responsibility exercise. So a really great partnership has evolved to tackle the problem in that region, but it's looking at the fisheries that are the source of the problem, and the place where it's impacted, and it's not necessarily the same place. So also members of the Triple GI are involved in kind of a number of innovative projects. So what else have I got here? This is a skateboard made by a company in America called Borreo, and it's made from fishing nets. So they're working with local fishing communities to collect nets and turn them into skateboards. There's also a company, it's like an NGO based in Europe called Healthy Seas, who make socks out of
spinning nylon or something?
Yeah, it's nylon 6. And also just creating art and working with local communities to create art out of fishing nets. What else am I going to talk about? Oh yeah, and so we're also developing a number of collaborative solutions through the Triple GI. So This was in Orkney in September, and this was a project that we supported with the technical divers to retrieve all the pots that were snagged on wrecks in the Scapa Flow. The Scapa Flow is where there's like huge numbers of World War II wrecks, and it used to be a fishing ground because wrecks make really good fishing grounds. But it meant that a lot of people had lost their gear on these wrecks. So we worked with divers to recover all of these over the course of, I think it was 4 days we were out there, five days we were out there. And we also pulled a load of trawl net up as well. And then a guy came and collected all the rope. We collected 2 kilometres of fishing rope, and he's made mats out of them, which he's selling to kind of, I guess, I don't know, well, people who like a nautical theme in their house. I don't know who buys these kind of things, but somebody buys them.
You wouldn't buy one yourself, is that what you're saying?
I don't know. I wouldn't really go with my my South London aesthetic in my house, but I see he also makes like doorknobs, and you can replace your dresser handles with like rope.
But not in Clapham.
No, not in Brixton. Yeah, and we're also, in the UK, we've been trying to highlight examples of best practice. So this is a fisherman, Nige, who's been running a project where he's modifying his pots, so if they get lost, the hatches open so they can't continue to ghost fish. So he's not able to retrieve the pots in every case, but he knows that if he's lost his pot, it won't carry on fishing, and that then has an impact for him that's positive because that fishing ground remains kind of fertile for him. So when there are fishermen who are kind of doing something positive, we really want to showcase that because it's part of our kind of attempts to work collaboratively with the fishing industry to address the problem, and also highlighting examples of, for example, fishermen working on net recycling projects is another thing that's recently kicked off in the south of the UK. And also another aspect that we're working on is actually these tags. They were sent to us, this photo was sent to us by a group in Shetland, and all of these tags arrived on beaches in Shetland. So you can just I mean, like, for example, Rotterdam is one of them, but most of them actually came from Maine in the States. So they were able to then locate which fisheries they came from in Maine and draw a map to see the journey. Gear tagging, it's interesting because you mentioned working at the FAO. The FAO hosted 2 weeks ago a consultation, an expert consultation into gear marking, because they're looking to develop a set of global guidelines for tagging gear. They've looked at tech solutions, so using like RFID tags. They've also looked at kind of like traditional methods of tagging gear, but that's something that we're really interested in seeing pushed forward because it could be a good way of addressing the problem. That's it really. That's World Animal Protection and the Global Ghost Gear Initiative. Hi. If you have any questions, I'm very happy to answer them. Yeah.